Today we're going to be looking at 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 6. It reads, "And it came to pass, as he prayed unto the Lord, there came a pillar of fire, and dwelt upon a rock before him. And he saw and heard much. And because of the things which he saw and heard, he did quake and tremble exceedingly." We're going to be talking about a pillar of fire and how that text itself can support Joseph Smith's case for the Book of Mormon. Pillar of fire as a Hebrew word. Remember, Lehi was speaking this according to Joseph Smith, and Lehi called this a theophany, a pillar of fire that he saw that came and dwelt on a rock. In Hebrew, there's a few different terms he could have used. He used esh, is my best guess. Amad ha'esh is pillar of fire. Now, the reason that he probably used Amad ha'esh is because in the Old Testament, we'll see a number of the same terms being used in reference to similar theophanies. So, Amad ha'esh, esh means fire, fire, flame, supernatural fire, fire, an altar of fire. So that makes sense that that's what he would use. The other options he could have used is or, which means a light or source of light. Or is the word that is used at the beginning of Genesis when God said, "Let there be light." That was the term or. Bahir is an ambient light or a brighter light, a sidebar. But remember, in the creation sequence, God says, "Let there be light," prior to there being a sun. So there was a source of light prior even to the sun, the light of Christ. It's just another kind of interesting discussion that we'll save for another time, but something to look at on your own. All right, the pillar of fire. As I mentioned, Lehi was familiar with this term already, because it was in the scriptures that he read. So in the story of Moses, this is the term that is used in Exodus and Numbers, referring to the Israelites fleeing from Egypt. So Exodus 13:21 uses the term pillar of fire. Exodus 13:22 uses the term pillar of fire. Exodus 14:24 uses the term pillar of fire. Numbers 14:14 uses the term pillar of fire. Now, Nehemiah came just a few years after Lehi would have left Jerusalem, so Nehemiah would not have been read by Lehi, but you can see that people in Jerusalem at the same time that Lehi left Jerusalem were still using this term, pillar of fire. So a lexicon can reference to different terms that are used for different things based on your surroundings. So this is a prime example here in the United States, what people call a can of soda or pop or Coke. The different terms all mean the same thing. They're all referencing the same thing. If we showed down here in the bottom left-hand corner, if we said, "What is that?" Some people might say soda, some people might say pop, some people might say Coke, but it all means the same thing. So same thing happens with terms throughout Scripture, throughout the world, especially when you're mixing in languages and different times. So this lexicon specifically, it would be geographic area. So if you grew up in one of the blue areas, you probably grew up with people that said pop, so you say pop. In green, you grew up with people that said Coke, so you say Coke. In yellow, you grew up with people that said soda, so you say soda. Okay, now let's look at what Lehi was referencing, or where Lehi's mind might have been as he explained this story to Nephi, and Nephi wrote it down. Lehi was raised near present-day Saudi Arabia, near the Red Sea, spent time in Egypt, and read from the Old Testament. This happened around 600 BC. Lehi sees the theophany that has been described multiple times by prophets and calls it a pillar of fire, just like Moses and the Israelites saw and led them through the wilderness. Along comes William Murdoch, 1972, but you didn't think we were going to get into William Murdoch. William Murdoch is the inventor of the gaslight. 1792, he actually invented the gaslight. The gaslight was the first ever light that could be put inside of a building, and if it was supplied gas, would provide a constant light by some pipes being illuminated. Prior to this, the only source of real light was a fire, whether that was provided through an oil lamp, a torch, a campfire. Any of these fires would have been a source of light. Doesn't mean Lehi and the people in ancient Israel didn't have the term light. They did, obviously, as we talked about it being mentioned in Genesis, their reference for any sort of light the source would be a fire. And that's the term he used. But now we have multiple sources of light, and instead of calling the pillar a fire, a 14-year-old boy sees the same theophany and calls it a pillar of light instead of a pillar of fire. Joseph Smith is a 14-year-old boy. He called this experience a pillar of light. Okay, possibly very little references in his mind to Old Testament language, to Old Testament terms. He wasn't referencing this theophany by any means that he had read about. He said, just as a 14-year-old boy would, this is what I saw. And he called it a pillar of light. Did he know that this was in the Old Testament? I don't know. But if he did know that it was in the Old Testament, why didn't he, as a 14-year-old boy, say, I saw this same thing that was in the Old Testament, the pillar of fire that is talked about? He didn't call it a pillar of fire, which makes me think he didn't have a very good understanding of the Old Testament when he was 14, which I can't blame him. I don't think anyone has a very good understanding of the Old Testament as a 14-year-old boy. But he described what he saw, and he called it a light. Obviously, a light would have been a more familiar term. Last question. Did the 24-year-old Joseph Smith make up the story of Lehi? If so, why didn't he use the lexicon familiar to him and give his story more credibility? If you're Joseph Smith at you're 24, you're sitting down, you're producing a story or a book, and you come and you want to give credence to your experience that you had, wouldn't you use the same term that you used? Hey, look, this prophet in ancient Israel saw the same thing I saw. We're both prophets. He saw a pillar of light too. That would have been really smart of Joseph Smith to use that same term and reference it back to him, but it wouldn't have been as accurate as it was coming straight from the mouth of Lehi, who would not have called it a pillar of light, who would have referenced Exodus in his vision and would have recalled that and known that that was a similar experience and called it a pillar of fire. Hopefully you can see now, as we're through 7 verses, that the complexity and the language in the Book of Mormon is unbelievably impressive, and it'll continue to be so as we go through the Book of Mormon. Hugh Nibley has never been more right as he was when he said, it would have been quite as impossible for the most learned man alive in 1832 to have written the book as it was for Joseph Smith.